Hello, everybody. Welcome to Outlawed Thoughts, episode 55. You're getting up there now. Um, we've got Tyler Janke here. I wanted to kind of have people on to talk about the whole Trump stuff and other legal things that are happening too. But you were the first person I got a hold of because, the whole legal angle of
Yeah.
things. Um, I think we'll do some breakdown stuff and everything. I think everybody at this point knows who you are. So it makes the intros this a little easier. I think you've been on now at this point like 2 or 3 times. So
At least, yeah.
yeah. And then yeah, I'm always going on
You've been on our
the
show a few times.
what do you guys call I
So
always forget.
it's Libertarian Podcast Review, but we do that Kill Podcast, which
Kill
is Kill
podcast.
Tony. It's a gay name, but we have Andy, so it works out just fine. Yeah. And you've been on there a few times, which it's always good to have you on.
Yeah, I've been trying to pretty much do every one. Normally, I have to set an alarm for that one, so it's a bit of a scramble.
Yeah. Sorry about
Every
that.
time no, it's not your fault. Every time I go on there, man, I'm like disheveled, like.
Hey, we're
But
the pod mic crew. You're the other one that has a pod mic like me. So
yeah, I actually really like this. I try to find. I hate my voice.
yeah, same
It's
here.
my
I mean, I don't
yeah.
hate yours. I hate mine. Yeah.
I hate listening to my own stuff, and which really sucks because I edit a lot of stuff on top of that, so it makes it even worse. But
Right.
I I like this microphone because it picks up all the low end of my voice.
Yeah.
Like, because my voice has a tendency to go way up and then it goes all the way down. And every other microphone I used that was like in the same price range, I had the Samson Q2U before this, which
Yep.
was like
I have that exact one. Yeah.
and that one works pretty good too, but I use that now as like a portable mic
Yep.
because it can use the USB so I can run it on my phone and
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, I
Oh,
do the same. And then at my office, I actually got one of the Rode condenser mics, which is USB. It's just not. This is much better. I don't know if this really matters to everybody, but I do like this. And by the way, I have the Rodecaster Pro for
yeah,
the equal.
that's my next upgrade
It's
is because I'm just using a Focusrite
oh
like
well, that works good though.
Solo.
Yeah, but I do love it because then it's got a soundboard and everything, and I just have it set in here, and it works great. So
No, I have a ton of ideas for a soundboard, and I'm like, I looked into what the cost of a soundboard standalone was, and I'm like, I might as well just wait and upgrade the whole thing, get whatever the newest Rode one is. That way it's portable, because my
yep,
understanding is you can get the rechargeable
yep.
set up. So yeah,
Yeah, I could,
that'd
I
be
could,
great.
I could take this out, and if let's say I would go to Pork Fest, you can take it out, and you can hook 4 mics in XLR, and you can even have splitters, so you can actually do 8 if you needed to. It's fabulous, and you can record directly there. I don't know why we're talking about this, but
Oh no, I
just
talk about I've had tons of conversations with people on here about minutia YouTube things because I've kind of made it the new thing on this channel has been having what I'm trying to be the most random guests possible. So I've had I had Chill Goblin on. He had never done an interview or podcast
how'd that
before.
go?
It was a dumpster fire, let me tell you. There
In
were
which way?
sets.
Because I haven't checked it out yet. In which way? By the
So
way, I'll get back onto some of your shows, but because I'm doing a Tom Woods. I decided to do a review, and so I'm
yes.
reviewing Tom Woods, and I'm going to do Tom Woods week. And I had day one, all these things lined out, and I have all the clips, and so I'm going through and getting them, and I started to record. Day one was 2 hours. Day two was 2 hours, so I had to split. It's Tom Woods 7 days. It's gonna be, but when I'm all done, I'm gonna just do put it out. So I've
You're gonna
been
be
busy
seeing
doing.
Tom Woods in your sleep.
Right. Sorry to derail this, but
Um,
go ahead.
no,
So what was the dumpster fire about?
it was. He did not look into my politics at all, and I had seen his JFK video on YouTube, and he has, quite a few. He gets good views on YouTube for what
Yeah.
his channel is. He was the same guy, and who did the video on Michael Malice. Taking down Michael Malice is like a fake anarchist that Michael
Oh,
Malice, I believe, retweeted and stuff. So it was like he had gotten some traction from that. But it was a good conversation in maybe the first like 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I know Benzo Barbie, who will show up I'm sure at some point tonight. She was there for it, and she liked the first like 30, 40 minutes, and then we started talking politics because it entered the conversation, and I knew he was like a leftist, but he was like a hardcore like Marxist leftist, and it was a mess. Um, so I explained to him that I really don't debate people. I did debate
Not after Jeremiah.
Oh, that was a shit show too. No, I
That was.
debated people when I was younger,
Yeah.
more on like a tournament basis with
Oh
school
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm fine with that, and I know the form of debate and all that kind of crap, but it's the internet back and forth where you can't actually have a debate unless you really have a moderator. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
if somebody like I challenged Vito Gesualdo, this guy that I watch the content he makes. I actually think the guy makes great videos, and I find his other podcasts funny. But he has horrible takes all the time. I wanted to debate him, and when I called him out, I asked for a moderator because of the same thing. I'm like, I don't want to have the blood sports debates unless that's what it's billed as. So like in the Jeremiah case, he came on and it just was sour as shit. I was not interested in taking
Yeah.
any of
And
it.
he looked. And it was funny is then people could go check that out. Then he had Ace on, and they talked, and I think or maybe that was a different one, but he did talk about it, and he played some of the clips. And I'm like, this is not an own, Jeff.
No, it was great.
It made him
And
look worse. So
I was happy about it because his channel has more subs than me, and he just gave me
right.
eyes on my name. So I was like,
And by
I'm
the way,
fine with this.
the debate stuff, I said this in the group chat the other day. I'm like, you're not going to catch me debating on the timeline anymore. I'm going to be sarcastic. I'm going to be joking. Just going to dive in and out. And then yesterday I was arguing.
Yeah,
Two different people, and it's just like I'm like, damn, I said I wasn't going to do this, but sometimes it's what it is. So
I argue on Twitter. I am guilty of that, but I always try to make sure that when I do, it's always with a bit of sarcasm on the back end.
yeah.
It gives you a little bit of something to joke about while you're
Right.
doing it.
Yeah,
I
crazy.
I have gotten in some bitch fits online though in the past. Before I was involved in the whole libertarian side of the internet, I definitely got in some like like quote tweeting people with videos just trashing them shit like
Did
that
you,
kind
by
of
the
stuff.
way, did you how big of your account was what did you have back then? Maybe you were arguing with Spud.
Oh no, I had the one account that I had that was nuked off Twitter. I think it was at 36 or 3500, something
Oh,
like that.
okay. So yeah,
It
you did.
wasn't big, but
It's
it was
bigger than
bigger than the
me.
account I have now.
I'm stuck at 1980,
I'm
1981. I go back and forth. They keep losing the people.
I'm
Whatever.
just over 1300, and then I just got stuck and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
it
just
happens.
hanging. Yeah.
Right.
So I think we'll get into this kind of meat of things here. The Trump situation, I suppose we'll call it the indictment. We had Alvin Bragg sort of coming out to say that this is going to happen. We had documents leak, and that was sort of the start of this. So I suppose with the leak and things like that, I've heard people talk about that. Um, I imagine there's an investigation and things that happen there, but I know that in the past we've had hundreds of those same kind of investigations done into how these leaks come about, and it never really brings
You're
anything
talking about
forward.
the grand jury.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that to me, that's where the media attention started for
Yeah.
me, because I was like, oh, why are these documents out here? Because they were not technically public yet. They were, I guess, released through one of the media companies. I can't remember which one, but that was a weird situation. But it made sense because we've seen that same thing a
Yeah.
bunch. Where cases about to go. I think that just happened recently with the Supreme Court. The
Right.
Supreme Court's just famously uh, can't keep anything under wraps. It seems like
That was the Dobbs case, the abortion, and that came out
that
early.
was it.
And by the way, they've I think they've finished up their investigation. They're like, I don't know. So
Yeah, and previously to that, it was a Second Amendment thing, I believe, with Bruin, where that
could be,
was
yeah. I don't remember that
I
leak.
think that was, I think it was pre-tensed by like a week or
Hmm.
something, but it wasn't very far
Yeah.
out. But it was, yeah, it's just crazy that that seems to be the case. But this same situation here. The document gets out there. My guess is there'll be an investigation that goes nowhere, but I wanted to get your take on that
Yeah.
first because that's sort of where my brain picked up on the
Well, so first of
happening.
all, what's interesting is the idea of the grand jury, which, they say you can indict a ham sandwich. The original idea, and I think it's in the Constitution about grand juries, is to have a check where the people can have an immediate check on the DA. That is no longer how they are operated. I mean, you just walk through. It's not a problem. Matter of fact, we just saw in the what was it? The guy that the murders. The
Oh
Yeah.
shit,
Anyway, McDowell, not
Murdoch,
Sorry,
Murdoch.
Murdoch murders, where the an officer is testifying in court, and they play back and basically show with the transcripts of the grand jury that he completely lied to the grand jury to even get there. There was like multiple things that they lied about. Okay, so then let's talk about the leak. Is it a felony? I'm probably. I mean, it's probably a jurisdictional thing. You're not supposed to leak this stuff to grand jury info. Who takes care of that? The DA. That's who is going to be.
Right.
So he's going to. This is the the police investigating themselves. This is the. It's not going to happen. I mean, you could always get a private DA type of thing, and we can kind of try to bring that kind of case. It's not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen to him
Yeah.
unless.
You could probably investigate it any way you wanted, and you're going to get the same
Right.
result, which is we don't know, or there's no
Right.
real
And matter of fact, with
recourse.
the Supreme Court, I bet they know. I bet it was a Supreme Court justice that did it. And they have just decided that it's not going to be good for us to kind of bring this out. So they're just going to, not do something, which, okay, possibly the way to go about it. What are you really going to do? You're going to try to go in and impeach a Supreme Court justice. So much like this DA guy, it's New York politics. It's New York DA. It's not going to happen. Matter of fact, I just listened to this podcast. It's called Letters from Sing Sing. And it's, if you've ever heard the story, it's this guy, this Mexican guy, when he's early 20s, gets fingered for a murder of a former cop who's running an illegal gambling site. It railroad him, and he gets life in prison. They've come up with all kinds of evidence that it wasn't really him, and the DA just doesn't want to do anything about it. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, this is the good old boys. This is kind of how we do things, and it's a horrible situation. And this is New York, and that was New York, and it's no different. Matter of fact, at the very end, this guy does get released, but he gets commuted by the governor that just got railroaded out, Cuomo. Cuomo does this, and then commutes his sentence. He doesn't forgive it. Commutes his sentence, and then the next week gets retired or resigns. And then they actually talk at the end to brag, the DA there in New York, and he makes it sound like I'm gonna change this thing around, and I'm gonna do this and this, and now he's going after Trump. So here we are. Anyway, grand jury, the leak. I presume it's gonna go nowhere because there's no political force to get behind it to do it. There you go.
So I think after that, and I'm on the same page with you there. When I was looking at when I first saw the leak, that was like the social media headway. Everybody was saying, "Oh well, this is going to be what gets them out of things," and it's like,
No.
nah, that's the reality. This happens all the time. We just saw this with like the highest court
Yeah.
literally that exists. It happens all the time. So, I did
And
see
by the way, just let's
sort
back
of.
up here. Who leaked it too? You assume it's the DA, but it could have been. I mean, let's not. Trump isn't a Jesus, as Marjorie Taylor Greene called him basically the other day.
Oh, he very well could
He
have
could have
leaked
done
it.
it too. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then by the way,
Yeah,
if he
if
did,
somebody,
that's where the investigation will go. So
yeah, I'm sure he would have had somebody else do it. You'd probably be
Cohen,
looking at
right?
Giuliani or Cohen or somebody, like somebody behind the
Right.
scenes. But no, so you ended up with obviously Trump kind of pretexts this whole thing by going out on True Social saying, "Hey, this is going to happen Tuesday. It doesn't happen Tuesday. There's this slow roll." where everybody kind of wonders whether it's even going to go on or
Right.
not. And then we get the announcement that they're not going to do it. There's going to be this 30-day hold off, okay? And then in this 30-day hold off, there's the Tennessee shooting. And then all of a sudden, indictment's back on. Everything's back to normal. The window of time doesn't really matter. So the news was sort of paying attention to something else, I think, at that point. But once it redirected, this kind of became center stage once again. And it was clear the indictment was going through. Then, obviously, recently we've got the arraignment and that whole process that happens. What is sort of, I think it was 34, quote, felonies. Um, I understand the charges to be, and I'll explain what I think they are, and then you can kind of correct me or tell me what the deal is and what your take on everything is. But my understanding is 34 charges, all relating to sort of the same subject matter or same charge, which is the fact that Cohen and AMI or another company is that had people there in the room or claiming as witnesses to this deal that went down where they were paying off Stormy Daniels. Cohen was initially giving the money off. I initially thought that was sort of going to be nothing because Cohen's just a horrible witness.
Right.
Like, you can't really use that guy to that much. But then, from my understanding, there's this other group, AMI, or this other company that also has witnesses that are more credible. So that becomes a little bit tricky. What is sort of your take on what we know so far? And is it as big or as little of a deal as everybody seems to
Right.
think?
So there's multiple factors. There's, I think, 34 counts. Okay. So each count, and it's the same thing. It's the New York Penal Code 175.10, falsifying business records, which I'm just looking at it right here. And it has a 3-year. So it says the County Board of Tax Assessors shall have authority to correct factual errors in the tax digest when discovered within 3 years. Okay, I think that's part of it. That's just part of the code. That's anyway.
So the one thing I forgot to mention that you can talk about too is the whole statute of limitations
Right.
stuff. Because that, from what I've heard in the media, is kind of the number one issue here for Trump's sort of lawyers, to be looking at. Apparently, New York says that the statute of limitations is how long you've actually been in New York. But my understanding is these things went on in 2009. Trump was living in New York at one point. So it becomes sort of this weird crapshoot there,
Okay,
too.
so let's kind of dissect the statute of limitations thing first. One, being in New York, all that does is, do they have jurisdiction? So does New York has jurisdiction? Do they have the reach of the law to come and get you and to have subject matter and persona over you to have you in court? That's perfectly fine. He's a resident of New York. New York laws, all that good. The statute of limitations, though, is how long they can bring the case. And typically for misdemeanors, I mean, I think New York's is usually like 2.5, 3 years, but they're trying to say that he was doing these things in the furtherance of another crime. Therefore, that's how it upgrades itself to a felony, at which point it's a 5-year statute of limitations. Now, here's the interesting part. These are all past 5 years. These are 2000. I mean, he took office over 6 years ago, January 20th, 2017. However, COVID did extend statute of limitations. They put a stay on statute of limitations for, I think, an additional 18 months. So you might have a problem here. So Trump himself pushing this COVID stuff, all this emergency act, boom, states then enact these things. I'm giving a little push to Trump here. See, I mean, he's not blameless in all this stuff.
That is kind of funny that it might have been his own fucking
indirectly. But if he had balls as the president, he would have done things completely different. I'll just, as a side note,
Agreed.
He was worried about getting elected, and in the end, if he had done what he should have done, he probably or maybe would have been elected. Okay, whatever. So that's the statute of limitations thing. That's one that you could dismiss the case right out of hand due to a statute of limitations. Sorry, you didn't bring it in time. You're done and over. You don't get to just come back anytime you want. And by the way, it's when the act took place or when you knew or should have known that it was taking place. So if he's instructing someone to do it and it takes a while to, the last act type of thing. Okay, so that's what it. Now let's talk about these counts. There's 34 counts of this falsifying business records, and it's basically 9 different transactions. The check happened, the invoice happened, you put in a ledger in your bank account or whatever happened. So it's like 3 different things happened on the same transaction, and now you do it 9 times. 34 or whatever. It's something along the lines of that. So it's not like 34 completely different issues. It's like, I write a check to you, Leighton. You cash the check. I make an invoice for it. I make a receipt. You say whatever that is. It's all the same, really the same transaction, but there'd be maybe 5 counts of it right there.
Right, all compounding with you filing it on your taxes or not filing on your taxes, which becomes the kind of needle.
Right. So that's how you get 34 counts of the same penal code that's happening. So you got statute of limitations issue. You've got all these multiple counts. And by the way, you could, and then what the details and the facts of the case are, we can talk about some of those, but I think that answered your initial issues right there.
Yeah. So I think the problem becomes, in sort of my 1,000-mile out view, as not being as in tune as somebody obviously like you who practices and stuff like that, as somebody who just like looks at these court cases from the outset, likes reading stuff. I'm like, okay, I've seen a lot of court cases that have like the civil or federal attachment to it where it looks similar to this. Like, it's not like the same as, say, you murdered somebody, where it's all on television and all being recorded as well, which is sort of weird. Even though this is a case involving the president, I would think there'd be more legalese stuff being written about it, but there really isn't.
Well, because it's kind of bullshit. That's kind of
right. And so that brought me to sort of my conclusion, which was where I'm looking at from the onset going, this seems like it all hinges on like 1 or 2 things that would be very easy to kind of knock out of the case that would just make the whole thing fall apart. The problem becomes, I feel like Trump's legal team has to do all of that before it goes to trial, because if something like this touches a trial, he's fucked. Because they're in New York, and there's like the argument, well, it only takes 1, but it's like, that's not going to work, because the people there are just going to sit there until the person just gives up. Like, that's the reality.
Absolutely correct. So, I looked at the Murdaugh. I watched that whole trial, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. He may have killed him, but they did not reach the burden that they needed to. It's obvious.
Yeah, that was my view of that.
It was quite obvious. It was so bad. And they did. So you go, well, okay. And once again, this letters from Sing Sing, they talked to the jury, and these people are like, matter of fact, someone's on this, and this ties in here. Someone's on the stand, and they're like, can you point out the person who did this? And this guy's Mexican, and she points to, this is an eyewitness, points to a black guy in the jury. And the jury, he's a juror, and they're talking to these jurors after the fact, and they're like, that was like, she couldn't even point him out. This just didn't seem right. But the weekend was coming up, and everyone wanted to go home, and they railroaded this guy because of it. My point is, now you get it's Trump. You've got your chance to take him in, and you're going to make him guilty, and you hate him for it's New York, for Pete's sake. They could very easily get him for this. So you're talking about what his attorneys have to do. They have to do a motion to dismiss and try to get it kicked out on technical grounds right away. There's a few of them, and we can talk about some of those other ones too, which is, okay, let's talk about, do you want to hear kind of how?
Yeah, no, if it's like get into that kind of stuff, because that's good. The stuff that's actually more likely to happen more recent, because I imagine that stuff happens pretty quickly.
Yeah, they did that. They're probably going to do a few things on, so the underlying cause here, basically that you're doing this in the furtherance of another crime. That's what he kept saying, and they didn't really say what that crime was. And then you look at the statement of facts, which is not the count, the petition against him. It's actually a statement of facts that they posted out, and it goes into a little bit more detail. And with that, you have campaign finance, which is basically what it is. When I first heard this, I'm like, are they trying to say that, or did Trump do the thing where he paid this hooker or this prostitute off? Well, she's not a prostitute. She's a porn star off, and he put it on as a campaign expenditure. What a dumbass. No, he didn't put it on. And they're saying that's the problem. So they're saying,
how dare you not report that you paid this hooker
Right.
and get free money from
right.
it?
Well, they're like, well, it was all to, he paid, that's this other company. They were buying stories. There's a doorman. He was going to come out and say some things. So they're buying these people off. And the campaign contributions were Cohen and this AMI company, that they were basically, it was contributions. They're saying
So-
okay, go ahead.
AMI, because I do have some insight into
Okay.
this from my understanding, and I think it's AMI, it's the abbreviation, but that company, they recently flipped, and that was like the big thing that came out with but the whole story there is they were actually the media company that Trump basically pseudo was running or was part of,
Yeah.
that was buying the Stormy Daniels story to sit on
Yeah.
it. So they were just going to buy it and then make it a dead story, which is legal.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
But the statement of facts keep talking about how they're doing these illegal payments. Now, how they get there is AMI and Cohen both pled guilty, and Cohen spent time in jail to campaign finance, fraud, which was so that's why they're saying, oh, it's a crime. This is what he's doing. So, but they did not make in any of those 34 counts. Once again, it's all the same exact penal code violation. They never said that it was a conspiracy. So it's got to be Trump directly here. They're, using, because Cohen did this. I just want to say too, Trump came out and they even have it in their statement of facts how Trump says, Cohen, is a horrible attorney. Yeah, I do agree. One, part of the problem he did was he was making these payments per a retainer. He never had a retainer. That's part of the thing. If you're getting an attorney to do something for you, that attorney, one, needs to have buttoned things up so it appears all above board and so that you have it. And then two, when you're an attorney doing these things, make sure that your client I'd rather draft something so I'm always protected as well. I'd rather have my client go to jail than me over something in our client relationship.
Cohen's in a bad position and a bad lawyer in a sense when he gets caught with his dick in his hand doing something illegal that he wouldn't have gone to jail for had he fixed a clerical issue. Basically, is what it comes down to. It came down to how he recorded things.
And that, by the way,
auditor.
That is a lot of times, especially he's a transactional attorney. That's his job. That's exactly what you're hiring. It blows me away.
Yeah, that is his area of expertise
right.
in law specifically. It'd be like a real estate lawyer or a real estate lawyer not knowing how to purchase a home or go through the legal process of purchasing a home. Like it's right. Something along those lines. It's like this doesn't make any sense. But it's I think the way that I see it at this point from the onset is it's like they're gonna have to do exactly like you said, and then hitting them with as far as like trying to get rid of this thing before it even gets close to a trial date.
Right.
But at the same time, if it does start to get close to a trial date, then I feel like Trump's best bet is to try to push that trial date as far out as possible. In almost a sense to get it as close to the presidential election, because assuming he gets elected or can get elected through this whole process, which Rekieta has an interesting Rekieta Law, the lawyer, he had a take on that, which was that he doesn't think this has anything to do with really trying to jail Trump, but really this is just about the getting rid of donors part of this whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense because there's a good deal of GOP friendly donors that will just not Trump or touch him as Trump as a candidate because of this, regardless of any situation, because the media is now going to use this as the new beating stick. The problem that I see with that whole sentiment is that I think it's more likely that this trial is to bog him down just in general with campaigning and traveling and doing his whole Trump shtick globally. On top of everything else, it seems like he's probably going to get hit with more court cases upcoming. I know
Georgia.
people have been paying. Yeah, it seems like Georgia, and then there's some more DC stuff. That seems like it's probably going to take force. He even mentioned it in his speech, which means he's obviously worried about it to some extent. So I think it's one of those situations where it might end up being one of those things where if they really want to get rid of you, they're just going to get rid of you, and he might just be fucked. But this case to me seems like utter bullshit.
Yeah.
To be honest, like that's just the frank take on
And then
it.
there's more. I'll go into some of the other legal issues as well. But let me talk about
Yeah.
Rekieta. Rekieta, this may be the result of what happens. I don't think that was the intent. And I look back through, I mean, Trump gets into office, immediately they want to impeach him before he was even elected. Go back to, this speaks of when I was a conservative, and Clinton's in office. And you're going to try to impeach him. We got to get rid of him. And you start to think, but then what? I mean, there's something behind. There's always that next person. But it seems like the time, Clinton is this force, he and his wife, and then Trump, they're in a force. So you've got to just smite the head off of them, and then you're going to be saved. And that I'm positive that's what this DA is doing, because there's too many lefties out there who, legal scholars and whatnot are looking at this sideways. And now look, is Trump are the donors going to flee? Possibly, but I think you're going to get mom and pop typical, you're going to get those little drips and drabs, $20, $100 here, people,
The quote grassroots,
that it's going to be huge. And sometimes that will overdo the big invest. And plus, he's got some money of his own. So I don't think it's as big of a deal as if it was someone else. I don't know.
Well, I think Trump's campaign is sort of a useful tool for him because it's one of the few things where he can make money while keeping it legal.
Yeah.
Because what people don't understand is like, so for instance, Trump he'll campaign, and the whole while he's campaigning, his hotels, his gift shops, his businesses across the U.S., hell, his fucking small companies that are online based get swarmed with people buying stuff just because his name is out there and they want to support him personally. And so, and that's completely legal. Like, I mean, you're allowed to do that. You're just making money off your name basically at that point. And from my understanding, I mean, he's got to be making a fucking just metric shit ton of cash off
and
that.
you see this with other campaigns, like they're have an exploratory committee and they start a campaign finance. Money starts coming in for whatever, and they drop out. And then I've seen reports where they still have millions of dollars in their coffers, and so they're trying to do something with it, and they're able to kind of. That's why maybe they run again, because they have so much money they need to get rid of. So
right. Well, I think there's a lot of that with the gubernatorial races a lot of times, where it's like a smaller town where there's only really two candidates for people to pour money into, so they end up with these gigantic just war chests.
Let me just talk about. There's one other glaring aspect to the indictment here, which is campaign finance law. So they're trying to kind of go over it with New York law, right? Which is the state of New York campaign finance. But there's a problem, because this is a federal election, and it was federal election law. Now the feds are already investigated Trump, and they said no problem, no harm, no foul. Continue on.
Yeah.
So the problem he's having here is and this is another thing that they're, motion to dismiss of whatnot, is the supremacy clause. You've got, if there's a state, the supremacy clause, what is it? Article 6, clause 2 or something like that of the Constitution, basically that, and by the way, this came about because of the Articles of Confederation. The states are more controlling the feds, and the feds want to be able to do this. So they have this clause in here, which is, if there's a state law that's in contrast to a federal law, the federal law wins. There's an explicit, which is, it's outright says this is the law that's going to be done. And then there's an implied, and that's kind of, and this was probably more an explicit, but sometimes it's an implied law, which is the federal is so overtaking the market, so to speak, in this area that it's the law you're going to hold. And think of as an example of federal drug laws. Now states aren't always following this, but marijuana it's a I think on the federal illegal list.
Oh, it's a
Right.
category one
Right. So at
narcotic.
the states, I mean, there's been back and forth battles about this, and can the states even do that? The states just don't do anything about it, and the feds aren't doing anything about it. Anyway, the point is, you've got a problem here because federal election law is very specific into this. And then you could even have, there was this case way back 70 something, 76, I think it was Buckley versus Vallejo, and it was one of the first campaign finances about First Amendment rights. So you've got free speech issues, you've got some of these other things, and depending on how brilliant your attorneys are, you may be able to intertwine all this and give a problem where the judge is just like, blah, I don't know, I'm out.
Right. So let's talk briefly about the judge, because I got a chat here from JC. He was
What's up, JC?
mentioning. He says, "Is it true that the same New York Supreme Court judge is the same one who has done a lot of other shady, high-level politicized trials?" Well, I think that's going to be the case with any New York Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just going to be the way that the
This,
judges work over there. The judge seemed to always be a hand-picked toady, even though it's supposed to be random. Hi,
yeah,
Tyler.
there is, they're high, JC. Oh my God. There are, they do have random how it is for the next judge, but there are issues where maybe the judge, there's some little gameplay that they might want to pull out. And I don't know. I don't really care. You're not going to get a good judge, I would imagine, in
Yeah.
this venue, County of New York, which is Manhattan there. So, and I think this judge had a previous criminal case that Trump had done with Trump University or something else, and kind of ruled against them, kind of had some things. And then evidently his daughter worked for Kamala Harris
Yeah,
campaign.
so the two big things I've heard is the daughter works for the Harris Foundation like campaign thing, and then recently this morning, I say 4 or 5 p.m. when I was waking up, I did see the news story that I saw running on Fox and CNN was that the judge. It was actually funny to see it on CNN, but they were running a story about the judge's donations and that he had donated to the Biden campaign, which was like their next thing. The problem is, and I think this is just the case always. I see everybody always bring up judges in cases, and I think people have a misunderstanding. It's like there's a finite number of these fucking
Yeah.
people. Like, it's not like there's this infinite pool. If you go to New York, I mean, what are we talking about? There's not thousands of judges.
No, and
I think we're talking about hundreds in total. And when you're talking about the Supreme Court, I think it's even, I mean, what is
well,
it?
there's 9. Yeah.
Nine, right? Nine. So, yeah.
And each jurisdiction, I mean, they'd have to move venue, and they'd have to say why this venue isn't appropriate. And it could be because it's biased. Well, I'm sorry, you're Trump.
Yeah.
Everything.
You're never going to not have
The,
bias.
the best you can hope for with this judge, and he may be, it depends on how old he is. I mean, let's say he wants to move on. Maybe he wants to be on the Supreme Court someday of the state of New York, or he wants to move out of the Superior Court district. Then he might actually try to make good rulings, right? So that he's not in the scheme of things outside his little bubble. He might be seen as a fair judge rather than just this partisan hack. Imagine if he dismisses this as a partisan hack. Now he's got some credibility. You're like, hey, this is a judge who will see things straight and da da. If he takes it in and he rules against all this stuff that's seemingly obvious by everybody's standards, now you're saying, yeah, he is a political hack. But they're going to come in. They're going to file all these motions. They're going to. By the way, you talked about the one item here, the length of the trial. I think right now, just the way that the court system is there in New York, they said it's not going to be till January 2024. You have a right to a speedy trial. He's probably going to waive time so that he can push it out, the discovery, whatnot. And so it will be prolonged at some point. But yeah, I don't know about this judge enough. And you're right. You could do a motion to have the judge, dismissed and have a different one. But that judge is going to make the decision. So every time your client's like, oh, I don't like this judge, and I'm like, I've got to go argue to this judge that he is not the appropriate person for this case. And if he says no, now you've got that situation against you. So.
Yeah, it's sort of a double-edged sword in that sense, and I've seen this over and over again. The Judge Schroeder that dealt with the Rittenhouse trial was one of those where a lot of people on the right lauded that guy for being a great
Yeah.
judge, and now I think just recently he just ruled on like a guy going to prison that was clearly self-defense, and everybody's up in arms
Uh,
over it, and I'm like, yeah, it's because like, I don't know what you think, these people aren't infallible. It's just like anybody
yeah.
else, and the same thing is true like in this case, in both those cases. Like really the jury is far more,
Yep.
the problem here is that the public is just not educated on these topics, and it's not the judge's job to educate these people on those topics. It's the fucking lawyers. Like they're supposed to
Right.
be making an argument against the law, unless they say something incorrect or represent somebody's rights differently or something like that. The judge isn't really going to say
I
shit.
by the
So
I would also say, when you look, I don't think I'm one of them, but I mean, attorneys are known as a bunch of, someone, when I was arguing online this last week, yesterday, this guy's comeback was that I'm an attorney and I'm a slime ball and I shouldn't be listened to. And I'm like, fair. Okay. But when you think of slimy attorneys, the problem is you don't normally first think of a DA, and you should. These people are
yeah,
horrible to the core. They work for the most disgusting corporation or organization, the government. And if you don't think that, which the jury doesn't, then they're trying to judge the criminal's attorney, and I don't like him. No. The DA should be number one in your head. That when you think of a slimy attorney, start with the DA, and then let's move off from there. There's plenty of them out there,
to
99% of them.
to fit a to fit a shitty analogy into it,
Perfect.
it really is like if you lived in a small town like I do, and you have, say, a sheriff, and in that situation, like you've got all these cops, deputies running around causing problems in the town for the people, doing whatever the fuck they want, abusing people's rights. It's the sheriff that is telling those people how to do their jobs. Like he's
Yeah.
the one that's in charge of the whole system. The DA's job, I mean, ultimately, they're the ones ruling over people like the public defenders and the different wings of the government's lawyers and
Yep.
different legalese systems.
I mean,
Uh,
think about
the
it.
DA is in charge of all that, so it's like this is public enemy number one.
My former law partner, when he works for the state now, but when we were first working together and he was doing a lot of criminal work, he's finally he just had it, and I'm like, well, think about it. You've got the judge is paid by the state, the DA is paid by the state, and if it's not him, if it's a public defender, he's paid by the state. The whole system is just against a lot of these people. So anyway, it's what you're saying is exactly right.
Yeah. Well, and I think the understanding here is that this trial is probably not the. I mean, it is a precedent, certainly. It's interesting to see, obviously, a state charging a president in this way, and obviously, I think there is something to be said. I wasn't aware of the part of that with the financing laws, so that opens the door to me to go, okay, well, yeah, if they don't have the position to charge him in New York, if they make the argument that it's federal, then that would pretty much blow things out of the water as is, because you don't have that to fall back on as the quote criminal aspect.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. I think at this point you're just kind of sitting back and waiting for Trump's lawyers to put some of their first documents in place. Obviously, dismissals and stuff like that. I would probably think we'd see those Monday, even
I don't
possibly.
I don't know the timeline for when they have to start filing those, but yeah, when they start putting those out. And by the way, they've had a little bit of time, right? I'm sure that
Right.
they've been drafting those up, and he's got a lot of money to be putting forth for this. It'll be interesting. I mean, like I come at this in two different ways. I come at this from kind of like a contextual constitutional attorney type of idea, right? Which is this is bullshit, and we just walk through some of the stuff that it is, and if they can do this to the president, they can do it to you, and they do, and you don't have the money to fight like he does.
Right.
That's my thing I always talk about, which is the OJ Simpson thing. Oh my God, look at he had all this money for these attorneys. Yeah, but the state and the city of Los Angeles spent, I think it was like 4 or 5 times more than he did. So if he didn't have that money,
On
you're
a
really screwed.
shit prosecution.
Yeah, for a
I've,
shit,
I've
exactly.
I
So,
was not alive for that. I was one
oh
of the
well.
few people, or if I was, I wasn't. What year was that? I was born in '99, so
Uh,
I don't know.
well, it was in the early 90s,
Yeah, so
96, 95, something
I
like that.
went back
94.
and I went back and watched a lawyer that I watch on YouTube break down that trial, and it's amazing to see just the prosecution. And you're like, he went through the salaries of some of the people that were in the trial, and I'm going, how the fuck? Like, I don't get what. Like, the defense the entire time is using the most horseshit soliloquy, just crap to get out of all this, and it's like, and it works because they sound good, and the
Well, yeah.
prosecution didn't.
Well, I mean, to get into too much, Johnny Cochran, I
That
watched
guy
that whole
was.
thing. He leveraged on the race thing. They immediately, when they started taking people through the house, as an example, they took all of OJ's white pictures out. They put all black people in there, which wasn't, his life. Anyway, they really leveraged off that and the riots that had happened in LA. So anyway, the point I'm getting at is Trump has all this money. He's really going to be able to do something with it. So I take that perspective and say this is ridiculous. But then the other part of me is also like, I don't know, dude, you got to have some responsibility. You hired a shitty, you do this all the time where it's like Trump is a genius and he's this great, manager. He hires horrible people. Cohen, this to do this
Yeah,
crappy job.
it's
And
insane that it stretches further than just his personal legal life. It's like you hire everyone you touch seems to be dog shit.
right. So, there's some of that to be said. And then you did all these stupid things. I mean, this is the whole Nixon, the cover up is worse than the crime. And that's that's happening here. So I don't have any sympathy for him. And then I don't really care, but, I see people like Charlie Kirk and Marjorie Taylor Greene and some of these people I just despise. And they're just like, their legs are wide open for him and he's God and Easter's about Trump. And I'm just like, I almost want him to get convicted because I hate them so much, but the left is worse to me. So I
Yeah,
will say no.
what's funny about that, the MTG and Charlie Kirk or Down syndrome head McGee, whatever he
Exactly.
prefers. The funny thing
The
about both
Sobek
of
too.
them, yeah, Jack the Fed. Those guys are like, kind of sucking the dick of this whole thing, and you're like, you guys like understand that at this point, you all like the right had to just accept all these Trump loving right wingers had to accept that he just fucked this hooker basically for money, and I mean that was really what happened,
Yeah.
and it was while he was married, and this chick is ugly as shit and looks like a worn
Horse.
out fucking horse, right? Like somebody's retired mayor. uh and this is what he like not only wanted to fuck, but wanted to fuck enough that he was willing to pay them $140,000 or whatever after the fact to get them to shut the fuck up.
Right.
Like, and it's like this is fucking hilarious, right? Like, I see what this is. Like, this guy clearly did this. Like, I feel like everybody recognizes this happened.
Right. And
Like,
it is cringe to see the right wing like this happened. This is kind of like my red pill moment during the 2016 election, when the grab 'em by the pussy thing came out. That whole thing came out, and I'm like, okay, who cares? But then I see the reactions. The left is
right.
just up in arms. How can he do this? And then the right is like, whatever. It's his personal life. And I'm like, I was very involved in a live when Clinton went through this, and it was this exact same people saying the exact opposite things. You're just a bunch of pieces. You're all shit. I'm sorry. So,
Yeah,
there
well,
you go.
and JC makes a good point too. And to think a guy with that much money wanted to bang her bareback, and that is the
Yeah.
story too.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
and this what's funny about this whole situation in that regard is like this is a chick who has made who, by the way, didn't make money off of this because she just
She had to pay it.
lost. Was she lost a $550,000 defamation suit? She tried to, and then on top of it, she appealed the loss. And then by appealing the loss, she lost another
Yeah.
$150,000.
Like his
So
legal fees or something like that.
and she went out on Twitter and is saying, "I'd rather go to jail." Now, obviously, Trump has to get somebody to enforce the order of the payment to get anything criminal done to her. So I don't think any of that'll probably ever happen. But it would be fucking hilarious if it
Right.
did. And your dumb ass is on Twitter going, I'm not gonna pay a fucking dime back. Wah. It's like, yeah, I kind of hope you get fucked too, and not just by him again. Like, so it's everybody is. I hate everybody involved in this situation.
I'm so with you. And then you get the anarchist in me, right? Is more like what you're doing there. And then I saw Malice was on. I was listening to him on his own podcast. He had Camille Foster, which is great. And then
Camille Foster, you retweeted that, and I went and listened to it because of that. I saw
good.
your retweet. That was a fucking great episode.
It was very good. And those two guys got me into all of this. It's like I first anyway. And what was I? Oh, so Malice said he was on with Charlie Kirk, so I went and found it. And Charlie Kirk is talking about this Bragg thing and bringing the indictment, and maybe the GOP, should they go looking for some things in maybe their own strongholds to bring cases to even the playing field. And Malice went off on him. He goes, even the playing field? He goes, these people want you dead. Why are you just trying to have it even? And he's like, that's your problem all along. You should be fighting much more to put them down. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But then in the same respect, it's like, okay, so some of me doesn't want this banana republic, right? You kind of want these higher ups to just do their thing, but then at some point I just want them all to just go. My concern is that the left has more impetus to do these things and they take out the right before the right takes them out. But maybe it's like mutual assured destruction. If you start to do all these things, maybe Delaware or someone else goes after Hunter Biden, and then at some point you're just like, hey, why? Let's cool it, everybody. Just back off.
Well, I to be honest with you, at my age where I'm at now,
You're so old.
no, it's the opposite.
Oh,
Being fairly young and having everybody in my age bracket is talking about like, oh, the world's gonna be in chaos, and by the time we're all like 50 and shit, and I'm going, yeah, but like I've seen the same shit happen over and over again, even in just the 8, 9, 10 years that I can remember, like all the political action stuff. And my dad's like in his late 50s, and he talks about the same thing. And my grandma rents a room from me, and she's in her, late 70s, and she talks about how she's been all through the same shit. So it's no different. It's all the same bullshit. And I'm like, so I don't know. Maybe if the shit really hit the fan, right? The currency collapsed. We have this war in Ukraine that we're dealing with. We're trying to gargle Zelensky's nuts and tickle Israel's butt crack at the same time. So you have this whole issue going on there where, like, we're split militarily. We're doing all these different things. We've got China creating BRICS and this, which some people think is big, some people don't. But regardless, you've got all these compounding things happening. Yeah, just start arresting people. Like, what's the worst that can happen? If it all goes to chaos, a hell in a handbasket, proverbially, as long as there's enough people here that can, like, try to pick up the pieces and build something a little better, that's sort of like the not pro-Civil War point of view, but the pro-advancement point of view, just get it done sort of thing.
Yeah,
but,
I waffle. I mean, I have kids.
Yeah, that's what becomes tricky. I have a lot of young brothers. And so it's like, I look at this and I go, I might be okay with living in that reality, but I know I don't want them living in that.
No, and you care for your dad and your grandma and everybody else and your friends that might be in a bad situation. But I'm with you. I have that same feeling, and then I back off, and I don't honestly know. All I know is that we are entertained right now, and I do hope it doesn't happen to me. If it does happen and it starts with the politicians, okay. Yes, let's have it happen. Let's rain down this terror. Quote unquote legal terror.
I mean, at one point, at some stage, I have to agree with Malice that if you're gonna do it, be a little more French about it. If you're gonna take them out, maybe not the legal way. Like, if you're gonna quote revolutionize the system, the American way of doing it is not really that. Like, and if you do it that way, I have a feeling you're gonna end up like Japan. And like I was recently watching a stream where a bunch of lawyers were talking about the same topic, and they were like, yeah, in Japan, every president basically gets arrested by the next president and put in jail because that's just sort of or whatever it is, the leader. The next guy just basically puts him in
Yeah,
jail
president.
every time. I think it's a president, yeah.
Yeah.
But they just throw him in jail every time. It's like
Well,
the new guy takes
that's
over.
kind of what we're doing. I mean, on
Yeah,
the
and
way out. I mean,
it really is. And it's funny to think too because it does all stem back to Nixon. It's like once that door was opened, it seems like every president, it's like been a topic. Looking back historically, the way I have is like I read about the Clinton stuff early on and my political interest because I had a grandmother on my other side of the family who vehemently defended Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and it wasn't about politics. It had everything to do with the fact that Bill Clinton had gotten his cigar wet in the Oval Office.
oh, so your
And
grandma, she liked that? Is it?
she defended him in the
On
fact that yeah, she was the type that would tell you that mouth stuff was not sex. So that wasn't
Oh.
cheating. Like she would just tell you like that was her excuse. I had her give me that argument as like a 15-year-old.
By the way, reading the Star Report, which I did in its full detail at the time, it was never really the sex part. The part that always bothered me was that
The hiding it.
it was a prime for manipulation and blackmail. That's really what to me was like. You can't do this as a president because of that. And whether you're going to actually impeach him, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel sorry for her. She's old enough. She has her agency. Women lib and all that stuff.
I just remember reading about I read it was a paper column and it was talking about the fact that like how they caught up the whole thing, like how they were able to put the investigation together and fuck them. And it was like, oh, you're just an idiot and you didn't hide any of this shit well. He tried to hide a bunch of the stuff like behind where people were and when they were working and things like that. And the way he did it was always the most lackluster way. And I'm like, oh, you're just bad at this.
Yeah.
Like, that's sad.
I mean, he had raped someone in Arkansas. This was nothing. Yeah. So Drudge Report, Josh, what's his name now? Anyway, we don't have to get into all that stuff, but yeah,
there's a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
There's a documentary, I think it's called the Clinton Kill List or the Clinton List or whatever, but it's like great. It goes through the 2 kids on the train tracks that were found dead with the whole relation to the drug smuggling stuff. It's one of the better documentaries I've seen. I need to make I almost want to do a podcast for this, like just an episode where I do this, but I have a list of 100 plus documentaries that I've watched over the last probably 5 years that are all blacklisted everywhere. You have to find them on BitChute and Rumble.
Yeah.
And I want to do an episode maybe for Rumble or here where I just go through a list of if you want to deep fry your brain real quick, go check this out.
By the way, let me just say before I forget, Clinton, you reminded me of something like that. Remember during the same election. Okay, so another thing that they may be able to come back to, or even in what I was saying about all these things that the Trump attorneys are doing, is so that they can preserve anything that they need to for an appeal, right? And an appeal isn't just, hey, I didn't get a fair chance. It's, hey, this judge ruled incorrectly on this. He didn't apply the law correctly on that. And that's how that is done. But maybe targeted prosecution. This guy said, it ran on the fact he was going to prosecute Trump, and he did. But there's someone, Clinton also paid for the Steele dossier. That's not been, why not go after her? It's the exact same.
That's actually a good point. I didn't even think about that connecting those dots, but that's a good. No, you are. That's a good point because it is the same situation. It's like you went and paid this guy. Was it what was that last guy?
Michael Steele.
Yeah.
There was
but there was another. There was a Russian, half Russian, half Ukrainian guy that was connected to the whole thing. He was the one who presented the story to the media, but he was actually paid by them to take that story around and present it as true. And it's well, it's the same thing, right? You're claiming he paid Cohen or whoever to go pay her. right? It's the
And
same
you didn't put it on
situation.
your campaign finance,
I
so
sure shit bet that wasn't on your taxes.
yeah.
Like, you know, it almost somebody I can't remember who, but somebody compared it to the Capone thing, and I'm like, no, because the difference was is Capone like Capone's situation was they got him on tax evasion, but my understanding of that whole thing is like that was only because they bungled the previous case for a bunch of other shit that was actually true, but the prosecution fucked up and like I think it was a Miranda rights issue or some
Huh.
shit. Like they didn't do something correctly and he was able to argue out of it. And so I go, this isn't that situation because Trump didn't have any credible criminal charges brought against him. He's never really had any criminal credible charges brought against him other than civil shit that doesn't really matter. This is the first time they've decided, oh no, we're going to do it. And then they decide to come forward with a case that even the fucking left, CNN and MSNBC are going, this ain't it. Like, so this to me is like, even the media who is continuously reporting on it because it gets clicks from the left, even the like heavy hitters of those media platforms have admitted that this is like kind of a nothing burger.
Yeah.
The right and it is worse, and I think in a way, assuming this doesn't lead to jail time, which I don't think it probably will. I think
I don't think so.
likely this is just going to fizzle out
Yeah.
eventually, and they'll try to make it an issue for the election period.
Yeah.
But I think I think what this shows is like that they couldn't find any ammunition. Like if this is the like
Yeah.
it's almost like the impeachment thing. Like when we saw the impeachment and I was like, this is the worst you got is this phone
Yep.
call that like I would have if I was in his position. Like
Yeah.
you think for a second I wouldn't call up some other country and be like, motherfucker, you don't do this shit right now, I'm gonna fucking pull every dime we're giving you. You're the president. That's what you're supposed to do.
Not only that, he ended up giving him the weapons anyway.
Yeah, and my favorite part, yeah, we pussed out and gave him the guns anyway. And then you listen to that call, and it really gives you, it gave all of America, which I think the left inadvertently did this completely, but it gave all of America a look into how Trump sounded while operating as the president of the United States,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was something nobody had. All you had was the media version of Trump. You had the version in front of the news camera, in front of the speech giving podium, talking to the media. This was him on the phone, probably sitting in his office, bullshitting and telling this guy what he wants done. And I think it gave people an idea of, oh, well, this is what he sounds like. Yeah, I'm fine with it, whatever. And so the right accepted it entirely. They didn't give a shit. The left made it a big deal. And instead it just gave him media attention. I feel like this is the same fucking thing. Like
Yeah.
you've brought this case, you know it's bullshit. Even the left media is admitting it's bullshit, but they're still putting it out everywhere to the point where are you going to keep doing this all the way until the trial date?
By the way, I'm just having flashbacks of when the 90 with the Clinton, Bill Clinton in office, because this is what the right did, and I was pushed. This is going to be the one. They're going to really that'll show up, and it's like it doesn't really do anything to the base. I mean, because what are you going to show that he's a scumbag? We know that.
Yeah.
I mean. You're not going to believe it anyway. I mean, like I said,
Well,
they're
it's
calling
why
him Jesus.
I find it
So it's
funny when they
useless.
attack him on being a quote chauvinist. Like I see people on Twitter doing that all the time. I'm like, motherfucker, that's why people voted for him. Like that's literally what happened here.
And
like,
all these things are not going to change. Like now he could come out and say, yeah, it was a stormy night, whatever, and he was banging her, and no one's going to care. I mean, it's not going to change most people's votes. So
no,
it's
nobody
kind of
gives a shit about that stuff, and especially his voting base.
Yeah.
Like I could see some random Democrats that might have come over to the Republican side fine, but the reality is that's like 0.2%. This probably won him more attention from, and I hate to say this, but it did probably get him more attention from even the non-libertarian liberty movement person.
Well,
The person
what's-
who's in the liberty movement, maybe an independent, but not a libertarian. Some of those people saw this and went, wow, they're trying to put him in jail. And then, I listened to, I don't know if you listened to this. I put it in the group chat a while back, but Trump Jr. was on
Yeah.
Timcast and did an interview.
I did
And
not listen to that, but
I listened to the whole 45 minutes, but the first 15 minutes or so was actually really good, and I found myself being a bit surprised He didn't really sound like a conservative Republican of the new age. He sounded much more either old school Republican or even diet libertarian. He was more of the stance of the CIA and FBI need to just go away, and these situations need to no longer happen. He started talking about a lot of government agencies, education stuff, the trans stuff, a lot of that stuff, with a lot more pointed takes than his father. Same thing with the vaccine stuff. He said he disagrees with his dad out open and out on the vaccine stuff early on. Um, Regardless of that, I think a lot of people heard that, followed up by the charges and everything else. And the question becomes, okay, so what happens if Trump gets out of these charges, which I think he will, the other charges fizzle out around him and he ends up running and he does win? Like, what are the chances that he goes in there and starts cutting through these things? That he's
0.
different than he was the last time? And I look at it and do the same thing. I go 0. This guy's going to use this as a voting ploy to get into office, but he's never going to do this. He's already publicly stated that he thinks the FBI was given bad information, the CIA was given bad information. Well, either they were given bad information or they're a corrupt thing that you need to get rid of. You can't have it both ways. Like, so it's clear to me that he'll fold the second he gets back in office. The problem is, DeSantis is no better to me. DeSantis is fiscally might be fine. He might be fine on cultural stuff, some of it. But in reality, when it comes to guns, when it comes to drugs, when it comes to war, when it comes to spending, DeSantis is just as bad as any of them. And in a lot of cases, he's worse because he's more connected to the evil side of the deep state GOP, and his wife is a fucking radical leftist. So that stuff scares the shit out of me, where I think, God, they're going to try to behead Trump, push DeSantis up the line, get rid of Trump politically, and then DeSantis becomes the guy. RFK and Biden battle it out.
And by the way, I think what do you need most? The GOP really needs for an election. It's turnout, and I think this prosecution is just going to enhance that if he's the person. So it's not going to play well in that respect. And you could be a president or run for president and be with a felony. By the way,
he could run. Can't you run from prison?
Well, yeah, you can. And by the way, then there would be an issue of, and I'm trying to remember, there is cases about trying to, like an sitting president, they're saying, nope, it's going to interfere. We're not going to have this. They would, right. He basically, or he couldn't pardon himself because it's a state thing. He can only pardon for federal.
So
but anyway, I'm sure he would be able to.
Funny question. And this has just popped in my head because I heard somebody, I think it was Styx Hexenhammer, mentioned this. So, according to what I read, it's by order that the Secret Service has to serve by the side and protect the President of the United States at all times. And that doesn't go away when you stop being president. You just kind of get that forever because of the way that it's written.
Yeah.
There is no word on that as to whether or not when they're in jail, or if they were to be theoretically put into prison, wouldn't they theoretically have to just have Secret Service agents with them anyway?
First of all, he wouldn't be put into prison. He's not going to serve time for this.
Obviously, but theoretically, if that happened,
you can petition to be not in general population or whatnot based on all kinds of issues. That would obviously happen. I mean, he would be. Something would go and
can you put Trump in say something insane? Say he's a normal dude when he was president. He's in this insane situation where he goes to solitary confinement. Does he have to have 3 Secret Service agents inside that cell? Because for me, when I read it, I was like, I understand when they wrote that, they probably weren't thinking about that.
Yeah.
But I'm going, yeah, this is one of those weird things that if it ever happened would be hilarious to watch happen, because how the fuck do you
I mean, maybe you somehow forfeit your right to a Secret Service. I don't know. You could decline it. as a
Right.
former president. But do you think Trump would ever do that? No,
Yeah,
he
no,
would want
fuck
his
you.
boys in the yard with him.
What's just funny about that is like I'm just imagining the prison, whatever jail, whoever's in charge of the prison, the warden, having to like do switch off shift changes with Secret
I know.
Service
Typically,
agents.
you're like, oh, former president in Florida. Yeah, I'm down. Be like, oh wait, I got to go to Sing Sing. I gotta be in prison with him. Fuck that.
I know, man, that job would fucking suck. You're
Yeah,
just sitting in a box and you have to listen to Trump talk all day. It's
yeah.
just you're like, this is our court mandated time.
By the way,
Um,
back on that interview with Malice and
mm,
Charlie Kirk, Charlie's like, "Oh, it's a done deal. He's the next nominee. Or he might have even said president. It's like such a, and Malice was pushing back, and they kind of had a disagreement there. That's the kind of stuff that rubs me the wrong way. That they're so for sure that he is going to be the next nominee because of this.
well, it's just as
Um,
likely he gets a DC charge or a charge from Georgia that actually
I
does
think the
stick.
Georgia one may have a better chance, actually. So, I mean, he
Yeah,
seems kind of
I,
scummy about that situation.
well,
Whatever.
he also seems scared about it, right? Because he goes
Yeah,
out in his speech, the first speech
yeah.
he gives after these ones, and what does he do? He mentions the two other cases they're trying to push against. I'm like, why would you do that? Just shut the
Perfect
fuck up.
calls. Perfect calls.
I
I'm
perfect
tired of him
call.
personally. I know people are like, I don't dislike him or whatever. It's just
I
I'm
didn't
just a little tired
mind
of him.
that speech. I talked about it on my show the day after. I said I thought that was better than when he announced, and I think it was the best speech he's
Yeah.
given in a very long time.
Have you noticed
That
his age at all being a problem?
um in that speech, no. In his announcement speech, yes.
Hmm.
In his announcement speech, I thought he seemed lethargic and slow, which is weird coming from Trump. But I think this one was decent, but he seems to have lost a little weight over like the last like maybe year. I don't know whether that's you know a health thing or whether that's just him getting healthy because he's getting ready to go on campaign, which is something that I assume politicians probably try
Right.
to do.
And
Um,
he hasn't got his Adderall
Yeah,
mix maybe with
I do
heroin
think
just
that's
right.
true. By the way, I mean, like, I'm big on that. When the and I will give Reddit credit for this shit. I mean, he took a photo, and for people who don't know, Trump took a photo in the UK, and he was like at a desk, but
Snorting Adderall.
it wasn't his usual desk. And what he had in the compartment of the desk was European Sudafed. And European Sudafed is different from the Sudafed you get in the United States. It actually basically is just low grade meth. Like, I mean, that's basically what it was. And he was taking it, and he had been called out previously by a supposed aide that had alleged that he was just abusing that stuff. Here's the thing, I know people here in the state of Alaska who do some wonky drugs, and one of them that I know a guy personally who used to have a real problem with doing that same shit, where he was living he was an expat, and he lived over in the UK for like 4 years, and got a bit of a problem where he was taking that stuff because it was cheap, and it's you can walk in a store and buy it, uh, and it's the same thing. He said it's like low grade Adderall. And so it's like, yeah, it kind of makes sense if you wanted to pep in your step, and you were giving these speeches. I think it's just too funny to see the differences. You look at a clip of him in one stage and another stage, and like, these are two different fucking people. It's the same thing that happens with Biden. I just assume
Oh,
whatever's Biden's
he's
getting's a little bigger dose.
he's extreme though, and that's kind of why I was asking because I mean, Trump is probably taking something. I think it was Penn Jillette was on with Joe Rogan, and I know he doesn't like Trump at all, but I think he had talked about how he was pretty sure Trump was taking something like that. Could be. Biden is obvious. There's good and bad days. I mean, he's cooked.
No,
I
he's a
can't
skin
imagine he's
suit.
going to run.
No, that's an interesting. Actually, I'd like your take on that.
Oh
So,
boy.
with RFK
Hmm.
announcing and running as a Democrat,
Yeah.
him having what I would refer to as marginal support from the left.
Right.
Here's my assumption and what I'll predict. The Democratic establishment is going to back RFK in a bigger way than they are already, and they're going to back him as their main candidate and not Biden, simply because they know that they'll be able to pull votes from the right far easily far easier with RFK than with Biden, because RFK is connected to the anti-Fauci thing. He's connected, which is funny because obviously you have somebody like Trump who is sort of has the opposite position in a
Right.
way, where RFK can beat him over the head in the debates with the fact that he created the COVID hysteria. He created this thing, right?
It won't
He'll
matter.
right.
And the reason why is because, there's those things where people go to, college campus or what, or anywhere out, man on the street, and they read a tax plan and then they say, who is this? Oh, that's it sounds great. Oh, it's Trump. And they're like, oh shit. So they don't care. By the way, RFK, it's nice he's on our side for the vaccine stuff. He's a horrible climate extremist, and he can go fuck himself for all that stuff. Okay, fine. He's on our side for this, but it's not going to work. And I think those kind of things, his extremist is going to come out. The left isn't going to embrace him because they think they've already called him like a kook and an extremist
Oh,
because of and
I
the right
think
want to do it because he's a Kennedy, and because they're going to be so locked in on this. I just don't think it's going to work. And I know I saw like Reed Coverdale saying, "Hey, this would be a guy," and I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry. If you go back and you look at what he's proposed for climate change stuff, oh my God, the fact that he happened to be right on the vaccine stuff, I don't know how, but it's good. But the fact that he's very much authoritarian, and I'm just not
so.
into
I
it.
agree with you, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate on one perspective thing, which is that if you're into the whole acceleration argument, you might say, well, the blow we get from the destruction of RFK will mostly be an economic one, right? He's not a
Well,
pro-war guy.
everything's economics.
Right, exactly. But in
I get
total,
it.
what I mean is, if he starts spending a bunch of money, it spirals the dollar out of control. We collapse, which is gonna happen most likely anyway soon. And then we have somebody in charge that's not necessarily a Trump or a Biden, who I think would both handle that situation horribly. I know people think Trump would be good at that. They talk about him talking about the Fed and stuff,
No.
but he is the type of motherfucker that will just bring in a new age of Keynesian economics.
He is he's like MTG, which is he gets something in his head and he wants to go forward. Someone
Just
said it,
rattles
and
around in there.
yeah, he's got no fundamentals. Like I remember seeing her and Massey on Tim Pool, and Massey just has a fundamental belief and he's studied it, and so he can project it out with all different scenarios.
I
She's
did a
just
whole I did a whole documentary on Joe Vogler, and this is a guy who did that to the up.
yeah,
You can't find a recording of that guy. What little is there is out there of him not saying something concise and to the point.
brilliant.
It's just
No,
always
by the way,
like,
good, great documentary. By the way,
oh
so good
yeah,
job.
but it's his whole like just the way he talked and stuff is very interesting to me because he was very collected.
Yeah,
Somebody that does that, and I hate the guy, is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is I don't know whether it's because of his law background or whatever. He fucking when he wants to give a speech or tear somebody down, dude is solid at putting
I,
together like the chain words, like and
he it's his law. I mean, he's argued in front of the Supreme Court. He's brilliant.
yeah.
By the way, I was well, actually a grade B ahead of his wife Heidi in high school. We went to the same high
Oh no
school together,
shit.
so she's very nice. And so I was initially pulling for him, and then I'm just like, no. But yeah,
Well, he's not
he's
the
a smart guy.
worst.
I get it.
He's not the worst, and he does. There are clips of him where he will, say some things where you're like, "Yeah, that's kind of based." Like,
Right,
I wish you were like that more.
right.
I think one thing I've seen interesting is, and this is an interesting little, I guess, kind of closing things out, of course. But one interesting question would be the whole VP thing for Trump. Assuming he is the front runner for the Republicans, the two names that I have put forward on this show that I've been like, these are the two I see him picking from, and I've given my reasoning are my number one being Kerry Lake, and my number two being Rand Paul. And so I'll see what your reaction to that is and then what you think.
JC is right. Heidi is mid. She was mid in high school too. Just she was very nice. That the VP is the most exciting thing we've talked about to me tonight. No, Carrie, Rand Paul. I do like Rand Paul, and I think that would be great, but I don't know if that would work. Carrie, but it might help get
Right.
some people, some different people. Carrie Lake, I'm not a fan of it at all. Okay, I watched her. Something just she feels so. She's a much smarter MTG, but there's something about her that I just don't like. And I
Oh,
think
it's soccer mom complex.
yes, totally, yes. It's they're just she cringes on me. And when I watch her on Malice, I like her and all. She's nice, but I just am like I don't know what it is.
It's a cultural thing for me. Anytime I see her, it doesn't matter what she's saying. I see her as the screeching soccer mom at a Starbucks.
Yeah,
It's just I can't get away from it. And I will
such
say
a
this: I don't.
misogynist.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do not like her as a VP necessarily. I just think those are my two people that I think he's most likely to pick. And I think my reasoning with Carrie is that
Is she a
she
better mama bear than your old lady up there in the Wasilla?
Sarah Palin
Yeah, that's
in
kind
a
of she reminds.
fight.
She
Um,
reminds me kind of like that though, right? Maybe a little bit
it is
better.
that same exact styling of politics. It's infected the right, and Sarah Palin ushered it in. The thing was with Sarah Palin in that era was she was removed early on politically by the media and the fact that she was panned for like being dumb when in reality like she had bigger issues, which
Yeah.
was her actual decisions. Now when she was in charge of the state of
Yes.
Alaska, she didn't do nearly as bad of a job as the people we've had in recent years. So a lot of Alaskans gave her
Okay.
credit for that, but then she soured it by moving out of the state to Arizona and
Yeah.
trying to run over there and doing a bunch of weird shit.
Trying to, there was
Carrie
something.
Lake,
There was something right when Trump was running. She came out, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Something she came out boldly about, and it was just a horrible take. It was, even as
yeah,
a
no,
conservative, it'd be horrible. But
she's the
libertarian
same
was,
person who on Red Eye or one of those shows with Andrew Napolitano got in hot water with the Republican establishment when she was announced as the VP for McCain because she said, rightfully so, that Alaskans and certain people should be able to smoke pot. Because there was a law back in her day in the state of Alaska, which was the pretense for us getting legalization here in the first place, which was an extension of the castle doctrine, which stated that if you were on your property in your home in the confines of your own castle, that the police couldn't arrest you for drug charges because it's your home. You can't enter the castle without pretense. And so there was like this extension of the castle doctrine that existed. And I mean, people will argue back and forth, but there was a thing called the Alaska Firearms Act that did something similar, where they said if it's stamped with "Made in Alaska" and it's related to firearms, it doesn't matter what it is, it's legal. Because the Second Amendment in the state of Alaska supplies absolutely, it shall not be infringed. Well, for a long time after the ban on fully automatic guns, there were fully automatic guns in the state of Alaska because of that law.
based.
And it wasn't until they were able to make an argument in another state, I think it was Oklahoma, got theirs shot down in the Supreme Court, and then that overrode ours. But Texas, because they did their suppressor law, has brought that back. So right now, technically, there's precedent on the books that make that 1996 law, the Alaska Firearms Act, law again. And so legally speaking, there is a workaround you could argue to the federal Supreme Court level right now if they made you the test case that you could legally have a fully automatic gun here with a made in Alaska stamp as long as it was made here in this state.
And
And they
the moral of that story is Sarah Palin for VP. Gotcha.
well, the moral of that story specifically is that she is identical in nature to Sarah Palin in the sense Carrie Lake is, in the sense that Lake is this mama bear type character
Yeah.
that latched on to state issues. So Sarah Palin made a big deal out of Alaskan issues. She made a big deal out of Arizona stuff with the whole immigration thing. And that was sort of where they both went off the rails. The problem was, just like Palin got in bed with McCain and it killed her career, Carrie Lake got in bed with Trump and it killed her career. Or at least not her career, but her running for in that position. I view her as a decent VP pick because Trump can argue that the same election shenanigans that got him fucked got her fucked, and it'll get him the woman vote from the Republicans and even some of the Democrats that did like her in Arizona, which is a swing state. So it's a good on his part for that, and it's also, again, a female. On the other hand, I mentioned Rand Paul because Trump has to feel like he has to cater to the deep conservatives because of him being involved in the COVID stuff. So again, when you have somebody like, possibly the Kennedy on the other side of the line with the Democrats,
Yep.
it makes sense for him to choose somebody like Rand, who is even better on the issue.
You've already done more thought than Trump will.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
His kids will tell him something, and he'll like, okay, and that'll be, or it's whoever has been.
Yeah, I mean, I can have wet dreams about them choosing somebody like Massey or Rand, but I don't think it'll happen. It's going to be Carrie Lake, or it'll be. I really do think it'll be Lake.
It's gonna be a loyal person rather than someone who strategically can help you in states that you might need it.
Mitch McConnell. Oh. He wants to just turtle. Am I not turtle enough for the Turtle Club?
Right.
Fucking Mitch McConnell was in the hospital or some shit.
Sweet.
He tripped and fell on a dick or something. I don't know.
By the way, I took a clip from when Reed Coverdale was on Infowars with Alex Stein was hosting.
Oh yeah.
I had copied that and I put it on my YouTube page, and it was starting to. It was it's been out there for a few months. Just today, it got taken down for like dangerous or offensive content. I was like, did Infowars do this? Nope. It was about dangerous.
JC just said something interesting. Trump will nominate Don Jr. as his VP, and all the monarchists will. He can do that, can't he?
Oh, you can have whoever for your VP, yeah.
That would be a fucking baller move. I'm not gonna lie, I hate it because I agree that all the monarchist cocksuckers are gonna be up and cheering, but that would be hilarious from a comedic standpoint. Just like no one's gonna be better at this job than my son. Damn it!
Oh my god! And then Biden takes Hunter.
Oh. Fuck me. Oh God, it's the battle of the retards.
So then you have that.
I don't know who I want to see fight more. Would I rather see a Trump versus Biden fist fight or a Hunter versus Don Jr. fist fight?
I haven't heard much of Hunter outside of his
I feel like Don Jr. could probably tap up Hunter Biden.
Yeah,
Hunter Biden looks flabby. He does,
soft. But I mean, you don't think a drug dealer has come up on him a few times, or some hooker has gone crazy? This guy knows what he's doing.
He did hide a gun next to his school, so this guy's been through some shit.
Don Jr. has just always had to snap his fingers and some big.
The only thing I'm thinking about is I'm thinking of Don Jr. walking around New York. And just homeless people. He's just self-aware. His situational awareness is like a video game. He just sees shit move in slow motion.
Yeah.
Like my I've got family from bigger cities, so it's I have family that told me stories about old school New York and old school Chicago and those areas and shit, and even like Hawaii back in the day and stuff. And like I went to Houston for a Magic the Gathering card tournament like 4 years ago. This is before it was even as bad now. And there were homeless sleeping on the homeless. And I was like, this is fucking, what is happening? I was
like San Francisco.
I walked off the fucking plane. I got to the convention center. There was 3,000 people there for the tournament. And there was just as many homeless in that same square block. It was fucking nuts. It was ungodly. Like I was looking at it.
You probably don't get much up there, do you?
Well, when you go to Anchorage, which is a city here, there are definitely homeless, but they're mostly just alcoholics. I mean, that's really what
Yeah.
happens here.
Natives, you're
And
saying.
yeah, that's what makes up a big portion of it, sadly. And
Homeless the
it's
gathering. There you go.
homeless the gathering, literally. And what's
So,
funny is me and all the rest of the people playing the game also look homeless. So it
yeah.
just looks like we got a better place to stay and
Right.
rented the convention center. Like,
That's funny.
but no, it was no, it was yeah, that was a crazy shit show. Showing up there and just having seas of homeless people was fucking nuts. What was I talking about before that? I got sidetracked from the
No, I
chat.
don't know. I'm about done.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna close out here.
I
This was a
enjoyed
great
it. By the way,
show.
this was, I thought, thanks for having me on to discuss that. We didn't talk about some other law stuff. How about maybe we should go through some of these things some more if you ever wanted to go. What's the name, the girl that was suing the Blaze?
Oh, Sydney Watson.
Sydney Watson. That's a good one.
That is a shit show.
Because Kurt Schlichter, he seems like a total piece of shit drafting this thing up. So especially with the response that the Blaze did. So I don't know. There's always other ones if you want to do them out there.
Here's a funny one though. I would actually love to do that one. We might have to do like a whole stream on that because
Yeah.
I'd love to go get like even just screenshots of all the different notable things in the case and just do like a slideshow.
Yeah.
That'd be easy for me to edit. I'll actually message you and figure that out.
Yeah,
I saw Legal Mindset.
I watched his the other night. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him covering it, and I'm going, okay, here's the thing. I don't like the Blaze. I'll come out and say that as is.
Sure.
Like, I just don't. But this bitch's court case is hilarious.
Yeah.
Because I'm reading this thing along with everybody else. Ricada got another piece of it, and I'm going, what is this? Like, what are you actually suing? Are you suing for, like, jokes? Because it kind of seems like that's what you're suing over is, like, jokes. Like,
and much like the Trump, where it's not, you talk all the time about a conspiracy type of thing, but you don't charge him on conspiracy. She goes against the Blaze, complaining about Elijah, and never brings him into the case.
Which is hilarious to me because Elijah, and I'm guessing this is why she didn't bring him into the case, is because she knows that he's willing to just trash both the Blaze and her, and so it'll make him look like a completely impartial person in the case because he doesn't work for the Blaze
bring him in as a
anymore.
witness. I mean,
Yeah, that's going to be funny too because she didn't include him now. He's way more likely to come in as a witness on their side than hers.
Well,
Because
either
she's
way-
not going to pay him, and he can get paid as a witness, from my understanding.
Now, typically, to be an expert, you can. You're not going to be able to charge.
That's right.
But they could subpoena him, and he's going to have to tell the truth and deposition. So he's going to be involved if it goes forward.
Dude, that deposition is going to be gold.
I almost think, though, I don't know. I did watch the Legal Mindset. There's a chance that this gets to, because I think that was a motion to dismiss, there's a chance it does just based on all the stuff she was. The counters where she was going. But anyway, I don't have time for all that right now.
I think she had like messages and stuff that will be fucking funny to bring up on stream.
No, totally.
All right, we'll plan that. Take it easy. Peace, guys.